What up, world? This is the GoalNet, aka TGN Golf in this case. And today we are here to talk about the Monster Mat. Started a little while ago and looping back to close out some of the content I am creating around your own home simulator system. I purchased a ton of different golf mats on the market, and check out the other series of videos with the TGN Golf logo flag, and that should let you know where you can find the other mat videos. If you're not familiar with the Monster Mat, just type it into the search bar on YouTube. I would say it is absolutely one of the most reviewed mats on the internet. I have a sneaking suspicion that the company behind Monster Mat probably sent a lot of golf influencers the mats to test. Very much in the same fashion, I get demo gear from Bauer Hockey or CCM Hockey when it comes to my content creation for hockey. So absolutely no issues with that business practice, but it is something I'd like to point out. I actually purchased this mat as well. If people are doing a good job with the reviews, it shouldn't matter, but it is something I often see in the comments, so I wanted to take the time to point that out before we get started. So for me, the Monster Mat has a lot of good things going for it, and I would definitely say, depending on how you define value, it might be the best value in golf. And the reason being, this is a 5x5 mat you see here in the video screen, and it's around $350 US. A 5x5 mat from a company like Fiberbuilt or Country Club Elite can be, $500 to $1,000 depending on your setup. And so this mat is, anywhere from 50% to like a third of the cost of some of the more expensive premium mats on the market. So if you are on a very fixed budget, you're not on the crazy like $150 budget I looked at before with the Matzilla, but something like $500 or $600 just is a price point you can't wrap your head around. This mat really does come in at that nice middle price point if we use like a good, better, best mentality. Best is going to be any of those $600 plus mats. Then you have the real cheapo mats at $150 where you're definitely going to make some trade-offs, but they can work for you. I respect everybody has a budget, so I don't blame you if you buy a mat that cheap. And then you might be that middle ground consumer, where you need, using old GM terminology, you had like Chevy, Buick, then Cadillac. In my opinion, this kind of falls into the Buick range. So it has some really good features. It's definitely a good quality product, but it's also not the best of the best in my opinion. And there are some trade-offs. So let's take a look at the pros and the cons of this mat now that we've done the overview. All right, so one of the most unique things about this mat is actually the turf on top of it. It is much shorter than a lot of the other mats on the market, and that's not necessarily a bad thing because for my money, when you strike one pure, this might be the best feeling mat that you can hit off of. And the reason I say that is because when we're practicing, unless you're specifically focusing on something like hitting the ball out of the rough, the most important thing you want to practice is hitting off a sort of flat surface with shorter grass, which replicates a fairway. And that's going to best help you get in a groove to practice nice, clean strikes. And if we look at this mat, it is a much shorter mat than a lot of the other ones on the market. And the reason I say that's good is because some of the other mats I tested, like the Matzilla, are so thick that when you actually make a good strike, which would traditionally take a divot, it can feel a little grabby or like your club sinks too much, and it has a very synthetic feel to it. For me, the Monster Mat, like I said, is 10 out of 10 in terms of feel for, a good strike. There's some reasons I'll get to a little bit later in the cons of why this mat is so heavily focused on a perfect strike. It leaves some things that are a little bit less than desirable in terms of, long-term use for hitting indoors. Unfortunately, hitting indoors is literally hitting indoors. and it's never going to quite feel like hitting outside. Or if you're going to hit lots and lots of golf balls, you need to make some concessions in terms of practicality and joint safety, where maybe you need to prioritize a couple things over feel. So hopefully that makes sense. But anyway, this turf is a shorter, curvier turf, as you can see. You know, there is some good turf there. You can mash your fingers in, and that's when I say when you strike it with the club, it can go down and through. Then that lighter gray layer there is hard. That's the bonding layer. And then the bottom, you have the nice thick foam cushion mat. So when you do go down and chunk one, you do have a nice soft landing area. Okay, so just to show you what I'm talking about with digging the club in, as you can see, if you really dig it down, you can go about 2 grooves deep on this club face before it bottoms out. And then in terms of turf interaction, just trying to stab at it here through the tripod, way more complicated than it might look, but just to show you some of the properties and the noises you might expect. And again, to actually see what it's like when you hit one chunk, or really just overemphasizing what a turf strike might look like. So for comparison purposes now, the darker green on the left is a piece of the EZT hybrid turf, which is the stuff that almost every equipment OEM recommends. It's what is inside the PXG fitting studios. It's what's inside the TrueSpec fitting studios. And this is very much considered the gold standard when it just comes to performance. And so if we look at this from the side, you can see how thick this is. You know, that I can get a tape measure out, not sure how well that'll show on picture, but on video rather, but you can just see how much thicker and softer and more curly this turf is. And it's also much thinner strands of the turf. And EZT actually doesn't believe you need a backing. So all of their turf in terms of the shock absorption comes from the grass up top, and it's not from the undermat. Versus if we look at the EZT, you can see how much thinner that is, and it relies on the mat. Unfortunately, you can't put these really well side by side, but hopefully it's showing through where both the mats are about the same thickness, but the big difference really comes in from the Monster mat having that lush underbacking and the EZT being all turf up top. So at the beginning, when I started to mention that the EZT is sort of the gold standard, but I really love the way the Monster mat feels when you hit that just flushed ball. It's because the shorter turf, in my opinion, feels more like a fairway. And when you take just a little bit of the mat, it actually has a really gratifying sensation like taking a divot, and you just don't get that with the EZT. And in my opinion, that happens because of the construction difference. One of the last really cool features about the Monster mat is it actually leaves a witness mark from your club strike. And there's a lot of mats, if you check Amazon or Instagram, where it's designed to show you your club path, where they have a really thin piece of turf, like a shaggy carpet. And when you take a swing on that grass, it'll leave a mark so you can see if you're doing an outside in, an inside out, or a straight path. Although it's not necessarily by design, the Monster mat actually does give you some of that. So awkward stance here, just trying to focus in with the club on the video, but you can see, take it back. And you can see just taking some divot patterns, but if you look right here, there's a dark green section in the turf. So there's the last 2 strikes, there's the first strike, and it leaves a mark. So if you maybe had some brutal strike, now you can see that's at like a 45-degree angle. So if you're somebody that struggles with tool path, or excuse me, club path, you can see that this mat actually does give you some performance feedback as well. You know, so if you're hooking a shot or pushing a shot or whatever, you can look down at the mat and instantly you will see the strike, and then you can also just kind of wipe your hand over it a couple times and get rid of the mark as well. Now there is one downside to the construction of this turf, in my opinion, and it sort of goes hand in hand, where the good thing is you get the witness mark. The bad news is, though, unfortunately, it stains your clubs. So it does wipe off. This was literally about 10 swings off camera. So like the 3 swings I used to do the witness mark video, and then about 7 more, and it gets really filmy. So if you have a little bit of patience, it really isn't that hard to wipe off. But I can say if you're hitting balls pretty regularly, it's a very first world problem for sure. But you know, when you're dropping $350 plus on a piece of plastic to hit golf balls off in your garage, like, it's kind of ridiculous when you put it into that context. It's a really frustrating problem. And one of the things I found is when you're playing indoor simulator golf, you know, you're trying to maybe play quickly and you rotate your clubs and you don't wipe it off every swing. And you know, maybe you leave something like a pitching wedge, and it's just an old club I grabbed to illustrate some of the points with the video with the turf interaction. But anyway, a club like this, your pitching wedge, you might hit 3-4 times in a round. If you forget to wipe it off at the end of the session and you leave that stuff on for a couple days and come back and be like, whoops, forgot to wipe my pitching wedge off, it is really hard to get off once it's caked on. So as you could see, instantly when I wiped it off after those swings, it comes off very nicely, but it is an absolute bear to get off if you forget to clean your clubs. And then as you can see as well, these are the shavings that pop off. I know Monster Mat has mentioned that if you wash your mat, these stop flaking, or after you use the mat for a while, it stops happening. I personally did not experience that. I will always maybe give a company the benefit of the doubt that maybe I didn't wash the mat thoroughly enough, but I'm also not an idiot. So I would imagine many people might have a similar experience with this like I did, but you can see you're gonna get those shavings. And so that really highlights my biggest negatives with this mat. Like I mentioned, the price point is really great for somebody that wants something premium, but maybe is a little leery like myself of spending $1,000 on a mat to hit golf balls in your garage once a week during the off season here in Chicago. It's just like a cost I'm not willing to take in. And that's really great, but there are some trade-offs in terms of it gets your club dirty all the time. And, you know, it's just kind of a mess with the shavings and everywhere. The other point I would knock on this mat is I'm a youngish guy. I'm in my 30s, pretty fit. And, you know, I have a high swing speed. My driver swing speed's probably about 108-ish miles an hour. You know, this is based off launch monitor data, so not crazy high, like above the 110, but by no means a slow swing player. And there are times where I mentioned this mat that's very thin feels unreal on perfect strikes. It feels really bad when you hit a chunk. I never got pain per se, but it is just an awkward swing which stops you dead in your tracks. And if you're somebody that's looking to improve yourself, you know, by practicing at home, and you are somebody who may be susceptible to hitting a lot of chunk shots, I'm not sure this is the best mat for you. And then to the point where I noticed the bad shots on this mat worse than some of the other products I've tested, I would definitely say if you are somebody that has any issues with arthritis or joint pain, you know, you might want to step up and get a different mat, you know, maybe something like the Fiberbuilt mat, or something like, you know, something like that, which is really designed where it doesn't feel quite as realistic as something like the Monster Mat, but it feels good enough. And you get that added security of injury reduction. And then there's also the Tartan Turf mat, which I'll be testing as well, which is also known more commonly as the Bullseye Golf Strip. Same company, same product. Spoiler alert, that is the mat I settled on. and I'll get to that in a further review upcoming, but just wanted to share that as well. All right, so thanks for watching this video with TGN Golf. If you like this comment, please write down below and let me know. Obviously, I traditionally focus around hockey and goaltending content, and that's where I built my name, but I also love golf and did decide to invest in a home simulator last year and did it very much on a shoestring budget and was very comfortable trying things that were returnable. So did, have a lot of trial and error. So definitely have some more content which could be created. If you're interested, let me know. And thanks again for making it all the way to the end of this video. Just to summarize everything we did in this video, the high points for this mat, the cost, I do think that if you're just going dollar for dollar at $350, it's hard to get a mat that has this great a level of feel and has that nice thick padding on the back of it. I've seen a lot of people buy like gym tiles or loose foam and glue it to a cheaper mat, and that's really a lot of work, and I don't think the quality is good. And that's where if you start doing the math that you're spending like $100 on a hitting mat, and then you're spending $80, $200, all of a sudden for another $100, $150 more, you get something that's more durable, produced by a manufacturer with proper bonding techniques, not spray glue. And that's where I say, I think this is a really good value, although I wouldn't say it's a cheap mat. The feel is like 10 out of 10 on those perfect fairway striped balls. And that 5x5 hitting side is awesome. It's a square mat, you can turn it around. It doesn't take a real tee, but they do send you with tee holders, which work perfectly. And I actually like those better personally than sticking the real tee in the thicker turf like the Easy Tee. I just don't think it holds strike after strike, just hitting off a mat. The low points for this are the flaking. The mat is just kind of messy. You get those little green shards everywhere. I didn't see it my time with this mat, but when material is coming off the mat, you are removing material. And so I don't know if after 5 years, if you're gonna start to see wear marks in the mat versus one of the other ones which has thicker turf, if that actual hitting surface would last over time. I don't have the data point to say yes or no, but it is something to think about. The club dirtiness, aside from the shavings you get on the ground, is a real issue. It might annoy some people, and so I point that out. And then, like I say, if you're somebody who has joint pain, that didn't affect me, but knowing how this mat feels because it has a thinner turf on those bad strikes, I would be concerned if you have a sensitive wrist, elbow, or shoulder, that this mat may not work for you. Again, that's not something I can physically test. My joints are in good shape, unfortunate, but it is something based on my experience I'd like to share with other prospective buyers. So if you're a young stud golfer that barely hits chunky shots and wants the best feeling mat, and maybe you're on a budget, I would say the Monster mat is like the perfect mat for you. If you're your traditional, mid-handicap golfer that's looking to improve, and maybe you're in your 30s, 40s, whatever, or you're gonna hit tons and tons of balls in your garage, I don't know if this is the right mat for you. So like I say, tons of pros about this mat, but there are some cons, and there's a subset of golfers. Again, you're gonna strike the ball really well, you're really not worried about joint pain, and you're on a budget, and you don't mind like saving anywhere from say $250 to $750, depending on what mat you buy. You're perfectly happy to, save $500 and just when you're done hitting a club, rub it off. This mat's gonna be great from you. If you're a pickier consumer, you have joint pain, you do potentially have more money to spend on an overall better product, then I would probably skip the Monster mat. So like I say, this is truly, there's some things I love about this product. There's some stuff that I think needs improvement, and it didn't end up being the final mat in my home sim, but it's definitely something that I think a lot of golfers, and especially better golfers, might really relish and enjoy this mat. If you have any further questions, hit me up down below. And like I said, also, if you like more TGN golf content, let me know and I'll continue to make some. Thanks guys, this is the GoalNet signing out.